Good morning. My name is Heather Keel, and I'm the president of the Lincoln Parks Foundation. Thank you all for joining us today. And thank you especially to our friends here at the Center for Great Plains Studies for hosting us. This is a really big day for the Lincoln Parks Foundation. I'm so excited to be here today. We're excited to discuss the Prairie Corridor on Haynes Branch project and announce several key developments. Thank you. I'm vertically challenged. We're pleased that many of our project partners are here with us today, and we will hear from several of them as we move forward this morning. Most of you have probably heard of Lincoln referred to as the Silicon Prairie. More and more, we're seeing this reference in publications and media outlets across the country. It seems to now be part of our city's brand. Most people focus on the Silicon part, the technology element, the vibrant startup community. They focus on the future. But what about that second part? The Prairie reference and our history. What about making sure this unique Nebraska resource, the Prairie, is here for generations to explore and love? What if we could honor our past and at the same time create an economic, recreational opportunity for the future? That is exactly what the Prairie Corridor on Haynes Branch project is all about. It's about preserving our heritage. It's about celebrating our past while creating a legacy for our children and grandchildren. It's about economic, recreational, and educational opportunities. It's about connecting the natural world and one another. It's about capturing that feeling that so many Nebraskans share, that love of our land and our natural resources. As Willa Cather so famously explained in O Pioneers, the land belongs to the future. We come and go, but the land is always here. And the people who love it and understand it are the people who own it for a little while. For those of you new to the Prairie Corridor project, let me tell you a little about its history. 7 or so years ago, a group of Lincolnites came together to discuss the greenery corridors around Lincoln. For some time, the comprehensive plan included the Salt Valley Greenway Loop around Lincoln, and described the connecting corridors along drainage ways that extended out from our city. But there seemed to be greater potential. It seemed we were missing an opportunity. As we looked at the Prairie Corridor on Haynes Branch, with Pioneers Park at one end and Spring Creek Prairie at the other, a vision emerged. A vision of connecting these community anchors with a tall grass prairie corridor, a trail that would extend to Conestoga Lake and also link to the city's nationally recognized trail networks. So Pioneers Park, Conestoga Lake, and Spring Creek Prairie. So with this, a project was born and quickly embraced by stakeholders. Spring Creek Prairie, the Lower Platte South Natural Resources District, and the city worked together with landowners to purchase parcels and easements along the corridor. These efforts paved the way for both prairie restoration and a future trail which is anticipated to run here. Initially, about 4,500 acres along the corridor were protected in some way, whether via conservation easement or public ownership. Conservation easement is shown in green, public ownership is shown in yellow. In addition, in the past 5 years, we have added about 800 additional acres to that number, as you can see here. We have also completed the first 2 trail segments within Pioneers Park. The Nebraska Environmental Trust initially awarded the Prairie Corridor project $900,000 over a 3-year period. A second $760,000 grant was awarded, and plans are underway for a 3rd year grant next fall. These resources, with matching and in-kind funds provided by more than 20 public and private partners, were used to purchase property, build the first 2 segments of trail, and support habitat development, including the reestablishment of more than 100 acres of prairie. Slowly, steadily, we have built support for the Prairie Corridor project among stakeholders and funding partners. And today we wanted to share this exciting progress, introduce you to several key partners, and encourage the public to help shape this project as it moves forward. But first, I would like to introduce you to Marie Woodhead. Marie is here today representing Congressman Jeff Fortenberry. Congressman Fortenberry represents Nebraska's 1st Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives, which includes the city of Lincoln. Congressman Fortenberry has been a longtime friend of the community, having served on the Lincoln City Council from 1997 to 2001. The congressman is also interested in habitat restoration efforts, recently announcing plans to introduce a bipartisan bill that will direct more federal dollars towards threatened ecosystems. The Recovering America's Wildlife Act would designate $1.3 million annually to fund state wildlife conservation efforts, programs, which could be a future source of funding for the Prairie Corridor project. Marie is going to share some thoughts from the congressman regarding his proposed bill.
I will soon introduce the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, a bipartisan bill that uses existing mineral and energy revenues from federal lands to fund state wildlife conservation, habitat restoration programs per federally mandated state wildlife plans. The bill will better enable the protection of unique places across the country. In fact, there are 38 landscapes specific to Nebraska that could use these funds. This gentler, more holistic approach will also help at-risk species before they require the extensive restrictive emergency room measures required by the Endangered Species Act. In fact, Recovering America Wildlife Act may in the future assist with critical conservation of the tallgrass prairie, enshrined in efforts like the Prairie Corridor. One of the reasons that Nebraska is a great place to live and raise a family is our appreciation of history and our deep connection to the land. We believe that heritage, culture, and protected natural space still matter, that the past is alive today. The Prairie Corridor connects generations and embodies these values. I look forward to being part of the effort to move Prairie Corridor Haines Branch project forward. Again, thank you for allowing me to be part of this important project, and I look forward to working with you all in the future. Congressman Fortenberry.
Thank you, Marie. I know your time is very valuable this time of year as Congress is wrapping up its good work. Recently, the Parks Foundation convened a group of 16 Lincolnites who share our vision for the Prairie Corridor project. The Prairie Corridor Cabinet includes business people, community volunteers, philanthropists, and others. Marie serves on this group on behalf of Congressman Fortenberry. Over the course of the next several months, the Cabinet will assist in fundraising, community engagement, and other aspects of the project as it moves forward. You will find a complete list of the 16 Cabinet members in a press kit that we were providing via Dropbox today. Nationally recognized conservationist and photographer Michael Forsberg chairs the Cabinet. And let me tell you, his passion for prairie is contagious. Currently, Michael serves as contract faculty for the University of Nebraska, where he teaches and is a fellow with the Center for Great Plains Studies and the Doherty Water for Food Initiative. Michael, I'd invite you to say a few words if you would, please.
Thank you, Heather. And hello, everyone. Test. All right, we're good. Thanks, you all, very much for coming. So I was born and raised here in Lincoln and have been very blessed to live, work, and raise a family in this community almost my entire life. One of the things I've learned about our home, traveling around with the camera in hand, is that nature has never been very far away from our doorsteps. That's all right. So whether that nature is literally in our own neighborhood or on a trail or beyond the city and the rolling countryside of southeastern Nebraska, it's remarkable, and it's our home. So here's a very brief vignette of photographs that are mostly from the prairies around Lincoln that reflects, I hope, the natural beauty that is around us and the wildlife that is among us. So at one time, much of America's heartland was covered with tallgrass prairie. 140 million acres that stretched from Manitoba to Texas and from eastern Nebraska all the way to Indiana. Today, most of that kingdom of grass and its big blue stem towers is gone. Only about 2% of Nebraska's native tallgrass prairie remains. Let me say that again. Only 2% of Nebraska's tallgrass prairie remains. So now, we have the extraordinary opportunity to preserve and strengthen our tallgrass prairie heritage here in Lancaster County. Here we still have these natural areas, beautiful living treasure boxes that are in both public and private ownership. And we have the tools to protect them. Each parcel harbors a unique history and natural diversity, and each is important for their own sake. But the connectivity of these natural areas is equally important. It is the connectivity of prairie parcels, the connectivity of the new trail to Lincoln's nationally recognized trail network, the connectivity to nature, and our connectivity to each other. It is this connectivity that makes this project truly unique. We have a generational opportunity here, folks. We can create this prairie corridor and we can link prairie together. We can ensure an even greater tallgrass prairie experience to our children and grandchildren as Lincoln continues to grow. And as I think about other great communities across our country, these communities have embraced the natural world in some meaningful way. Whether it's the beaches or mountains or rivers or forests, they embrace these resources and make them part of their community culture and identity. Tallgrass prairie is our natural resource. And it is, as Heather said earlier, becoming our identity as voices from outside looking in across the country are increasingly referring to us as the Silicon Prairie. So let's lean into that moniker. Let's claim the tallgrass prairie as our own. Let's embrace it and let's protect it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We're delighted you're willing to chair the Prairie Corridor Cabinet. Next, I would like to introduce you to three important project partners. We have with us today Paul Zillig. Paul, would you stand? Thank you. He's the general manager of the Lower Platte South Natural Resources District. We have Glennis Collins, director of the Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center. And we have Lynn Johnson, director of the Parks and Recreation Department. NRD and Spring Creek Prairie representatives were sitting around that table many years ago when the vision for the Prairie Corridor project took shape. This morning, we are excited to announce that later this month, the Lincoln City Council will be considering two long-term agreements involving the NRD, Spring Creek Prairie, and the city. These agreements formalize the partnership among the three entities and reflect each entity's commitment to the Prairie Corridor project. These two agreements will be on the City Council agenda on first reading, December 11th. Public hearing and action is scheduled for the following Monday, December 18th. We're excited to formalize these long-term commitments to the project, and I want to thank Glynis and Paul, Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center, and the Lower Platte South Natural Resources District for their support. Next, I would like to introduce another Prairie Corridor Cabinet member, Doug Gans. Doug is Pinnacle Bank's Vice President for Private Banking. Doug has been with Pinnacle Bank since 1998, and he currently serves on the board of Cedars Home for Children. He also assists with the fundraising efforts of several human service nonprofits, and he recently completed a 6-year term on the Community Health Endowment Board of Trustees. Doug, would you join me and say a few words, please?
Sure. Thank you, Heather. Thanks very much. Good morning. The mayor asked me if I would share a few thoughts about how the business community could be impacted by this project. I think just to begin, in general, I think this project can have a huge positive impact on the business community. Heather said I've been with Pinnacle Bank for 20 years. Over the last 20 years, we've seen the physical boundary of Lincoln grow. We've seen the economy grow on a fairly steady upswing. We have very low unemployment. And I think this project could be viewed from the business community concept as one of labor supply. We've got businesses in Lincoln that are growing. It's that Silicon Prairie concept. 20 years ago, there wasn't a Huddle down in the West Haymarket or a Q2. And these people have to go out and they've got to compete. And they're competing not only with their neighbors here in Lincoln for labor supply, they're competing with Omaha and Des Moines and Kansas City and Denver and to some extent Minneapolis and Chicago. So they have to, I think, utilize amenities such as this and take advantage of projects like this to promote our community so that that labor supply issue can be dealt with. I would like to think that the demographic is a 60-year-old banker with 2 knee replacements, but probably not. Probably not. I'll enjoy this project. I will not be running on these paths. But the demographic that our businesses are looking at is probably that 25 to 35-year-old, college educated, healthful lifestyle. These are people that run and bike and hike. They're environmentally conscious. These are the people that are coming to Lincoln, hopefully, to help our businesses continue to grow and to allow our community to keep going. You may have seen this last weekend, the University of Nebraska hired a new football coach. You picked up on that? Well, Coach Frost and his wife have a little baby boy. And it would be really cool to, in about 5 to 10 years, have the Frost family jumping on bikes over here by Memorial Stadium, riding out to Pioneer Park, down to Spring Creek Prairie. And as the young people say, that really would be a neat deal. So I congratulate the mayor and Mike. Job well done. I think this is a great project and look forward to being involved with it. So thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Before I introduce our next speaker, I want to mention a third Prairie Corridor related item on the City Council agenda later this month. The city's 2016 to 2018 biennial budget included $400,000 for parks-related endowments. The City Council will be asked to consider transferring those dollars to the Lincoln Parks Foundation for the Prairie Corridor endowment. These endowment funds will cover the maintenance costs for corridor property acquired to this point, and the plan is to continue to grow this endowment as additional properties and easements are acquired. The transfer resolution will be on the City Council's agenda for first reading on December 11th, with public hearing and action scheduled for the following week, December 18th. The Lincoln Parks Foundation has served as the fiscal agent for several new parks projects over the last 10 years or so, including Nebraska Centennial Mall, Woods Tennis, Tower Square, Sherman Field, and Union Plaza. The foundation is pleased to serve in this role for the Prairie Corridor project as well. And the city's seed money will be critical to help us leverage additional private dollars as the project progresses. Next, I'd like to invite Sandra Washington and introduce her. Sandra recently retired from the National Park Service, where she served in several roles. Let's see if I can get them all right, Sandra. They included Associate Regional Director for Planning, Compliance, Cultural Resources, Construction, Communication, and Legislative Affairs. She's a board member with the Nebraska Trails Foundation and the Girl Scouts of Nebraska. Sandra is a former Parks and Recreation Advisory Board member, and she currently serves on the Lincoln-Lancaster Planning Commission. Sandra is also a member of the Prairie Corridor Cabinet. Thank you.
When the mayor asked if I would consider this project, well, there's no other answer besides yes. So I'm thrilled to be involved on the cabinet. We've heard from others today about the stewardship of the environment, about connecting with our natural heritage. And my work at the National Park Service gave me the chance to see conservation put into play across a wide spectrum of landscapes and geography. Whether I was assisting a local community to establish bike and pedestrian trails in East Des Moines, or I was working with the city of Indianapolis to develop a county-wide greenway plan for stormwater management and recreation, or whether or not I was working on the preservation and the development of prairies in the Midwest, I had a chance to see many wonderful things. No matter what, the goal was always the same: to make connections between people and special places. As Heather described the Prairie Corridor, the trail will connect two outstanding resources, the Pioneer Park Nature Center and Spring Creek. These facilities will be connected with a 10-mile bike and hiking trail, and it will be wonderful. The city's been awarded federal recreational trails funds for this project, which, together from matching funds with our partners, were used to help complete the first two corridor segments that extend from Pioneers Park through the Nature Center. Next year, the city will seek, again, more federal dollars for a third segment to take the trail further into the corridor, and that construction will begin in 2019 or early 2020. The Prairie Corridor is a community-wide resource. It's an invitation to families and visitors to get out and to immerse yourselves in the prairie. And we know, whether from studies or our own experience, that reconnecting with nature makes us happier and healthier people. Every fourth grader in Lincoln has the opportunity to experience the beauty and the diversity of the prairie thanks to the Prairie Immersion Program. This program is a collaborative effort between Lincoln Public Schools, Pioneers Nature Center, and Spring Creek. These facilities already offer interactive programs for thousands of students and families each year at either end of the corridor, and it's long time that we connect them. The Prairie Corridor on Haynes Branch will build on the strong foundation already offered by these destinations and the lasting efforts of our partners. We have an opportunity right now to reach across organizational boundaries for the long-term stewardship of our prairies and to show our children and our grandchildren what it means not just to be stewards, but to be big dreamers.
Thank you, Sandra, for your leadership and vision. Now, you have heard from 4 of our Prairie Corridor Cabinet members this morning: Chair Michael Forsberg, Marie Woodhead, Doug Gans, and Sandra Washington. I know we have additional cabinet members that are here today. Would you please stand to be recognized? I believe we have Dick Campbell, Michael Farrell, Eric Gerard, Glenn Johnson, Mary Lane Joecki, Ray Stevens, I don't see him, Sandra, and I think the others you've heard from, Marie and Michael. We also have some Lincoln Parks Foundation members here and Parks and Rec Advisory Board members. Would you please stand to be recognized? Some of you are already standing. Thank you for being here in support of the project. Finally, I am pleased to introduce another champion of the Prairie Corridor on Haynes Branch project, Mayor Chris Beitler. I know Mayor Beitler shares our passion for celebrating Nebraska's heritage while preserving opportunities for our children and grandchildren to connect to the natural world. I know that he shares our vision for a regional cultural attraction that will draw visitors from far beyond Lincoln. And I know he shares our commitment to engaging the community as this project takes shape. And with that, I am pleased to invite Mayor Beitler to say a few closing words.
Thank you, Heather. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're smiling a long time about this morning, because this is the beginning of something really incredibly great. And I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted that the city is part of a community-wide effort, a public-private partnership. That's what the Prairie Corridor is all about. And I think it's terrific that this morning all the pictures seem to be somewhat related to it. But thank you for that big effort. And I also want to mention just the fact that as we started to put this together, I think this is one of the largest and finest groups of people that have ever worked together on a single project in Lincoln. So this is going to be an incredible effort, and I think an incredibly successful effort. I want to give a special thank you to our Parks and Recreation Department for its work on the project. Len Johnson, of course, has been recognized. Also, though, two of his key people, Nicole Fleck-Tews and Sarah Hartzell, would you raise your hands? Because you guys have been tireless, and we thank you very much for all your efforts. And I want to thank Heather and the foundation and our partners at the NRD and Spring Creek Prairie, the folks here at the Center, again, for Great Plains Studies, and all of the Prairie Corridor cabinet people. Everybody has been working together flawlessly so far, and this is just going to be a wild ride, I think. Over the last few months, we have heard a great deal from the public about their interest in the environment generally and the Prairie Corridor projects specifically. This input was incorporated into Lincoln's Environmental Action Plan, or the thing we call LEAP, which we discussed at a press conference yesterday. The LEAP prioritizes efforts to conserve and enhance natural resources like the Prairie Corridor. And as this project progresses, I know that our partners will continue to seek the public's advice and guidance in appropriately sizing what this community treasure will ultimately be. As we move forward, it's important to remember that this is not a typical project. This is different. This is something very special. This is a generational effort that will take a lot of persistence and a lot of passion, and quite frankly, several years to complete. It will take the patience of the sower. But as we stand here with our partners today, I know that we all have a great love of this place that we call home, and from that, I think, the heart to speed this project forward. Let me just go into my background a long ways, just for a minute, to tell you where, as I was thinking back, I think the idea of heritage first hit me pretty hard. And it was as a small boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, and my father, who grew up in Richardson County, took me to the Heim Cemetery, which was one of the earliest cemeteries in Richardson County. And it sits on a limestone bluff overlooking the Nemaha River just southeast of Dawson, Nebraska, a little ways. And it was interesting to me on so many levels, and I can't tell you how many times I've been on that bluff in my lifetime, but I go back there often. And it was interesting in the first instance because my father told me stories of the people who grew up in the area and who had relatives in the cemetery, and about their lives, their successes, their failures, what they clung to, what they believed in, and stories that altogether constitute the kind of framing of values, the values I began with. And I think that all of us have stories about how we got the values that we have. And the plots in the old graveyard were fenced off by family. And even if they weren't fenced off, organized by family. And the whole idea of family and the structure of the institution in our society and the burying of family members together speaks again to another aspect of our values. And demographics, things you never think about today, but which reflect the adversity and the toughness that pioneers had to have, are also in the graveyard in the form of little tombstones of children who died very, very young. And so I think that we must not forget these people who struggled and suffered to build this wonderful place. The values that sustain them are our heritage. The place that so challenged them is our place. We need to understand how they persevered, and we need to understand how the natural beauty of the original prairie lifted them and restored them through those many periods of frequent hardship. On this prairie corridor, we can learn about them and about ourselves and reinforce anew the values that distinguish us. This prairie to me is first and foremost for our children and our grandchildren to better understand from whence we came and how we can be strong. Thank you very much for your part in this.
Thank you, Mayor Beitler. And thanks to all of you for your patience today as we had much to tell you. At this time, we would invite you to ask any questions for myself, the partners that we have in the room on the project.
We'd like to invite the partners to come forward in case there's questions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, if you're on the cabinet. Yes, you're a partner.
You're not sure what my title was.
I've got a question over here.
Prairie. Trails will go all the way from Lincoln to there. You will obviously need to build some kind of facilities for people abiding who aren't necessarily members of Prairies. Is there plans?
That's something we're just starting on now. Down at Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center, right now there's a parking lot a little bit south of our northern boundary, and then our visitor center, and there's an admission fee for people to go onto our 3.5 miles of mowed trails. And so we're talking about right now is, yes, we're going to suddenly be having many more people joining us. We're delighted and thrilled to be able to introduce more people to the Prairie through this entire project, through what we've already got restored down at our site, including some historic wagon ruts. And so no, we don't have, we're in the planning and asking the questions now. We don't have that finalized, but we know we'll have to deal with bikes, dogs, just, more people at more times of the day. We don't allow bikes and dogs out on our prairie to protect the wildlife there now. We know they'll be coming to our door there though, and we want to be welcoming, so we'll probably have some transition zone. And again, where people can come on, learn what we're all about, but not continue through with those things. So it'll be in the coming year as we figure out what that's going to look like, and also what that trail connector from our northern boundary down to the visitor center and the interpretive things we have there. We're really excited though.
Would you come up to the microphone for your question so that everyone can hear it? And then similarly, cabinet members, if I can get you to step to the microphone.
What kind of success and obstacles have you encountered so far in your property acquisition process for the gray areas that are shown here on the map? Thank you.
That's a good question. I'm Nicole Fleck-Tooze with Lincoln Parks and Recreation. And I think, some of the challenges are making sure that people understand that this is a voluntary, incentive-based approach that we're taking to the acquisition of land and easements. We're working with private partners who are interested in the project. And I would say that over time, we've really had a greater and greater level of interest as we've continued to pursue that. Certainly, the trail will require a continuous corridor, and so that'll be an area where it's initially like a little bit like putting puzzle pieces together. But certainly as we have segments that are long enough and associated with the trailhead where we can invite people to go ahead and be on those trails, we'll begin to build those. And so certainly that was true of the trail segments that we've completed within Pioneers Point Park to this point, and we would anticipate that being true in the future. We wouldn't wait until the entire corridor land rights were acquired before we would begin to build trail. Did that answer your question?
That's a good start.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a lot of challenges in getting that kind of length of continual access.
Yeah, there are, and certainly we envision it as a generational project. I mean, it will take some time to do that, and we'll have to be flexible. Part of the reason that the trail, for example, is shown as a dashed line on the map is that we don't know precisely where it will fall. So that's a good question. Thank you.
Do we have others? Well, everyone did a great job, apparently. We don't have any questions. Great. Would you?
Taking the lead with your fundraising for this.
The question is, who's taking the lead with our fundraising for this? That is part of what the cabinet is working on with the foundation establishing that. We also have some resource groups that we have established to basically take care of different segments of this project. We're interested in trails, economic opportunities, and so on and so forth. And so that's where we're at with this, and the grant writing. The foundation provides support for that as well. Do my cabinet members have anything to add that we have missed today? Great, well, thank you again. Oh, no, I have someone here. Yes?
I just want to ask, so what is your process for restoration? Are you working with the university, and then, do you replant? I mean, what is that process that you go through to do the prairie restoration?
The question is regarding prairie restoration and the process.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're working with a number of different, we have a technical committee, we're working with the university. So far, the prairies that we've reestablished, we've worked with the Prairie Plains Resource Institute out of Aurora, and we're using local ecotype, high diversity prairie grass mixes, and then identifying based upon whether we're in upland, whether we're in floodplain or other areas, what is the best mix to do. And the great thing about having the university involved is then that research component, because it'll be really important to identify what measures are working well, what measures we maybe need to modify in the future. And, we're also really trying to promote diversity for pollinator species, and so we'll be tracking how we're doing in terms of our prairie establishment for that. Thank you.
Anything else? Great questions, great information today. Thank you again to everyone for being here, for our cabinet members and our partners and all of you. We're looking forward to this project, and I'm so excited for what it means for our future generations and the legacy of the Prairie.